Hi everyone, my name is Craig Askings and I'm the Network Infrastructure Manager for Telair. I've been in the ISP industry in one form or another since the last century. And I'm here today to talk to you about our NBN rollout, a smaller NBN rollout. Telair is a B2B ISP. We offer voice, managed IT, connectivity over most mile providers in Australia. So pretty much everyone in this room, I'm sure we deal with you in one way or another, either as, peering, customers, suppliers, etc. We're all friends here. We all work with each other. Initially, we were planning a traditional rollout, leasing a rack in each POI, populating it with equipment, and then using either dark fibre or DCIs to get back to our POPs in each state. From the network engineering side of this project, finding the lowest cost router and out-of-band equipment that would fit our requirements was a priority. To maximise the number of POIs we could have a positive ROI on. During the planning phase, and thankfully before we signed any contracts for rack space or purchased any network equipment, NBN released their new price book, which included lower pricing for 10 gig ER NNIs. Between that and the pricing that had come back from Infraco on their dark fibre, it made sense to revisit our design. The revised plan involved finding DCs within the ER optical link budget of as many POIs as possible. Infraco was willing to share KMZs of the planned routes with us so we could verify path diversity and distances for that. And stage one would cover about 39 POIs. The locations we selected for bringing on to do this was Interactive at 8 Mile Plains, Polaris out at Springfield in Queensland, and Vonix on the Gold Coast. So that was our expansion in the Queensland area to cover Brisbane and surrounding areas. We chose to expand into NextDC P2. We were already in P1, so the two together gave us good coverage of WA. Our primary customer bases are Brisbane and WA because that's where our two offices at the time were. We now have a Melbourne office as well. And so that covered that. We also chose to go into Equinix SY5 in New South Wales. That was more to connect to other carriers, give us some better diversity in New South Wales rather than part of the stage one POI rollout. And then from that, we went into router selection. I'd worked with OSNOG in the past and was comfortable with it for in this use case. It wasn't the cheapest device we accessed, but it was close and well below the quotes at some other vendors that we spoke to. The CLI was close enough to other routers that we used in our network that my other engineers were familiar with. So the future operational costs around that made up for the higher price. And this hardware also had hop-swappable PSUs, whereas the first one we were looking at was fixed PSU design. And this also had 400 gig, whereas the other one that was cheaper that we were looking in the initial design to keep that low price point was only 100 gig. Integration with our Juniper BNGs and our core network was not an issue. We had ISIS and segment routing, EVPN, pseudo wires up and running in that lab within about a day or so. All standard protocols, all just worked. It was quite nice. In our design, each NBN NI is attached to an EVPN pseudo wire and then transported back to a pair of Juniper BNGs in each state, configured for pseudo wire head-in termination. All nice and standard. This allows for automatic failover of TC4 and statically configured EE services while not having a broadcast domain across our entire network, or across both BNGs for that matter. Since this was a greenfields deployment in our network, and the scope of this design had a high degree of standardization and repeatability, we went for a golden config template and a patching run sheet template that was put into NetBox, and we used that as a single source of truth. So as staff and myself were deploying these, we could just go into NetBox, document what we wanted, and lo, we had a config. Now, one of the contributing costs to this that we had to take into account was dark fibre within the data centre. Cross connects become a concern when you're dealing with this as far as costs go. So that was something that was important, as was fibre distance to each of the pois. Not to mention where InfraCo had capacity. All of that factored in. We predominantly chose NextDC over AggregationNet as an example, even though they covered the same particular areas, came down to cost of cross connects. That simple. Shout out to Polaris. They've got carrier rooms, interconnects within that, didn't cost us anything. Great guys. Now, when it came to the migration process, we started with phone a friend. We had an NI up and running, called one of our mates, said, do you mind if we migrate you? This might not work. Did it? Funnily enough, didn't work. It was a HFC modem. For whatever reason, the provisioning just failed. Tried again with someone else, that did work. So got him sorted out, it was all good. After we had that, we knew that, yes, we could connect someone, all the ducts were in a row. We chose one POI and did a bulk migration. And then when that worked, looked at, what worked, what didn't, fixed up the little quirks here and there, and then started on to multiple POIs each week, rolling through as they came online. And then after all that was done, back to single POIs again, as well as just mop up of AVCs that accidentally got deployed onto our not our NNI, someone else's NNI that we were using prior to having our own at that location. Now, when it came to our rollout, Queensland is mostly complete. We've still got Sunshine Coast and working out how we're going to get to the 6 regional POIs. We're talking to people about that. Polaris, Interactive and Vonix on the Gold Coast were all added as part of this. Again, with all this, we worked with InfraCo to make sure that we had paths that made sense, would be within the distance, would have diversity where required, that type of thing. P1 and Focus Perth 01 in WA were our original locations. We added P2 to give us connectivity to POIs down on the south side and around the middle of Perth. And so that's where WA is at the moment. The Victorian rollout is underway at the moment. I think we got notification of a couple of NNIs that have been handed over to us in the last day or so, so we're busy getting those patched in and getting ourselves organised to start cutting over customers in Victoria. So that's where we are with stage 1 rollout. Stage 2 is going to be New South Wales, ACT and South Australia. We've already got equipment in place in New South Wales, so that's going to be just a continuation on working with InfraCo, finding out where it makes sense to interconnect, most likely NextDC, and then repeat, and so on. Now, during this particular thing, we did end up with a couple of interesting fibre paths. This one here between NextDC M1 and just down the road to one of the POIs, it's only 2.5 kilometres, but it's 12 k's by the fibre. And, all's fair to InfraCo. If you're doing this stuff, you want to reuse fibre you already have. So in this case, it goes out to a particular joint and then, around and comes back again. But it does mean that in this particular case, we're using an ER optic, not an LR optic, but all's good. This one here, constraints on this one for diversity, because we had the interactive to Polaris route needed to remain diverse to the NextDC B1 to interactive path. So this led to some creative routing via the Brisbane CBD. The initial estimate was in the 75 to 80 kilometre range, and we had purchased 100 gig ZR optics for this route based on that estimate. When it came in, it was 82 k's. We did get the link up, but it was not stable. So we ended up replacing them with 120 kilometre ZR Plus optics, and that worked, and it's been stable since then. The original ZR optics won't go to waste. We'll use them somewhere else in our network. And yeah, thank you. That's what we did.